The fundamental question is, did we hear anything new from Carrie Lam today?
I'm not sure we heard much new from Carrie Lam, no. I think she repeated some of the things she'd said, both on the extradition bill that sort of kick-started this round of protests and on developments since. She was very strong in her condemnation of the violence, and I guess that's what we would have expected. So there wasn't a lot new. Perhaps the new thing was that she came out and met the press at all. She's had a relatively low profile over the last few weeks, so maybe that was something a little bit new today.
The thing that has to be dealt with is not just about that extradition bill anymore. It's about her and her leadership, of course, which is very much under scrutiny. Fundamentally, how did this administration, and you could argue the one before, lose the hearts and minds of the people of Hong Kong?
Yeah, well, I think we've seen a series of events over the last 5 or 6 years. I mean, from prior to Occupy, when we had this big debate in 2014 over the way that political reform might be delivered in Hong Kong, whether the chief executive would be elected by some form of universal suffrage. We had the Occupy protests. That was followed by, actually, in a sense, a sort of foretaste of some of the things we've seen. We had some violence in Chinese New Year in 2016. We had the oath-taking saga in the legislature. And somehow the government has never quite managed to get back on top of the narrative, to sort of deliver a message and persuade people in Hong Kong that there's a good, promising future for the city. And we've seen over the summer a lot of sort of pent-up frustration and anger and hatred really come to the surface.
Tim, how do you expect China to respond? How long can China tolerate open dissent? Well, they've tolerated it, if that's the right word, so far for a couple of months. The profile of the central government in Beijing has been pretty low during this period. There was a press conference from the Hong Kong and Macau Affairs Office, which is the bit of the government that deals with Hong Kong, a few weeks ago, but that was short. It just offered support for Carrie Lam, support for the Hong Kong police, criticism for the violent protesters, actually not for peaceful protesters. But otherwise, they've been quite quiet. So, it seems at the moment that the level of tolerance in Beijing is probably higher than most people would have expected, if you'd outlined this scenario to them a couple of months ago. Now, let's see what happens. I think Beijing is wanting and hoping that the Hong Kong government and the authorities and Hong Kong society more broadly can get itself somehow back on a more normal track. If it can do, then they'll continue to take a low profile. But let's see what happens if violence escalates, if things get worse and worse as they have been over the last few days. Then who knows? We'll have to see whether some more harsh form of intervention from Beijing is seen by those in the way forward. China's been quiet probably because it's under international scrutiny. The thing is, the Chinese military has come out to say it is ready to quell any further unrest if needed. Do you see the military getting involved at any stage? I still think that's highly unlikely. I think that's been the general view of most people over the last few months. I think partly China's being relatively low profile, not just because of international scrutiny, but because of a calculation that doing something tougher might actually make the situation worse. And it probably would. If the military was to be deployed, then I think we'd see another very negative spiral in Hong Kong politics. So I think there's a pragmatism here to the relatively low profile from Beijing. Now, the question is, what could the military do, even in that hypothetical scenario, that the Hong Kong police can't do? And I think it's probably not clear to people in Beijing that that's an option which gives them any benefit over the cost that it would cause.